Hello world and welcome to episode 12 of What Does This Not Do? In this episode I show the other filters in VCV-Rack, and with that I am already through and looking at VCAs next. And with the oscillators applies here, new releases or new acquisitions of mine, I summarize in updates. Since the last episode, more filters have been added, so I'll start with them right away. This functional convolzilla of Nisty is described as a convolver. It can load and play all kinds of WAV or AIFF files, but actually it is meant for impulse responses. There are so many, but especially microphones, amplifiers and rooms, so reverb. I did not find anything for filters on the internet, but I did not search too hard. Finally, I found it in my VST plugins. There are quite a few programs that emulate filters, and so there is a great chance that impulse responses are included. The Nisty module, with its almost unpronounceable name, not only plays the files but mixes them with an input signal and outputs that mixed signal again. Two different signals can be processed simultaneously, each input signal also having an associated output, i.e., without input signal, the corresponding output remains mute. You can control both input and output levels, and there is a stepless dry-wet slide. To hear something, active must be activated. The original signal can be heard when bypass is activated. This can also be controlled by triggers on the corresponding input socket. Reset resets the signal to the beginning, because the result can sometimes swing too high. For active and reset, I would have liked associated CV inputs. The output signal can be reduced by -6 dB using the button. A file can be loaded in two ways, either by drag and drop into the large display or via the context menu, which is opened by right-clicking on the large display. Below that we can specify the block size. The smaller the value, the cleaner the signal, but the greater the load on the CPU. The two options, impulse normalized and remove zero tails from impulse, act directly on the loaded sample and ensure that no sudden peak levels occur or cut the sample off when the amplitude drops to zero. Available impulses shows all previously used impulses. I have no idea how many can be stored here, but for me there are already over 30 and these are listed alphabetically. Someone really thought it through. The last option is invert screen, which turns the background black and the sample white. Incidentally, the name of the loaded sample can also be seen in the yellow banner. Depending on what is loaded for a sample, this module is also a filter, although there is no way to edit its parameters. With dysfunctional convolzilla, nevertheless, you can create extremely extraordinary sounds if you have the right impulse response. Even the micromodule slew is not really a filter, but still has properties that go in this direction. In principle, the module is made up of two identical units. Both have one input and output, and the CV input socket, with which the button bypass can be triggered. The actual modulation curve is set with the parameter shape, and here you can hear and see quite a sound change. But here I would also have liked a CV input. However, this is always available for the parameters attack and release. These represent an own envelope for the modulation waveform. And with small values in these parameters, the modulation signal can be further shaped. At least it becomes duller. The main application of this module should not be a filter, because the possibilities are too limited. But in another episode with comparable modules, he will surely show what he can do. I almost overlooked the two VCFs from PG Instruments because they are not listed under filters. You can find them only if you enter the search term VCF. PG VCF and PG Stereo VCF actually only differ by the stereo option. And only if both inputs are assigned, you get a signal from both outputs. The modules are simple one-pole filters and offer at parameters only cutoff and resonance. Resonance does not go to self-oscillation. Cutoff can also be controlled by CV, but the intensity of the modulation must be controlled externally. The modules offer the three filter types LP, BP and HP, which can also be used simultaneously. The regulators work clean and effective. Two simple filters that do what they should do. The format, however, I find unfavorable. You do not even make micro modules out of it, but the width of the VCF of fundamental should be feasible. The robotic bean tilter is a paid module and can be purchased through the plugin manager. It is designed in stereo. If no signal is present at the second input, the same signal can be tapped at both outputs. The module is both low-pass and high-pass filter with a slope of 12 dB per octave each. The filter type is selected via the tilt control. In the middle position, the filter is neutral. LP turned to the left and HP turned to the right. Otherwise, this is the normal frequency controller, and this can also be controlled by CV. With the associated attenuator, the strength of the modulation can be adjusted, and so also a filter sweep between the filter types are generated. Personally, I am not really convinced by this concept. I would have liked it better if the tilt parameter always sums both filters to 100%. So mid 50-50, 9 o'clock 25-75, 3 o'clock 75-25. And of course corresponding intermediate values. In addition, still single exits for each filter and CV controllable resonance. Too bad there are some free modules that have more on it. One of my absolute favorite modules in VCV-Rack is the Fdagen No filter from South Pole. The No stands for non-Euclidean. That is, its overwhelming sound quality and indescribable versatility only come into its own in a non-Euclidean room that has been painted with the color out of space. If you want to know how that sounds, I recommend the music of Erich Zahn. Essentially down to earth are Étagères or its stereo version Deux Étagères. According to the description, these were inspired by the Eurorack module Shelves by Mutable Instruments, but do not reproduce all the characteristics. The modules also have small print EQ filter, so we are not dealing with a pure equalizer, but with a module that combines both. The term variable filter bank comes to mind. As with a fixed filter bank, you have frequency ranges, but here you can change the frequency within the range and use the gain control to decrease all frequencies when turning it from the center to the left or raising it to the right. At frequency ranges, it offers highs, high mids, deep mids and lows. Each frequency range has the two CV controllable parameters, frequency and gain. In the range of the treble, the gain control acts on all frequencies above the set frequency. In the range of the bass, below the set frequency. The two middle bands are designed parametrically, i.e. with a frequency control one selects a frequency and with Q a range around this frequency which is lowered or raised with gain. That sounds partly like a resonance. In addition, Étagère has its own output for each frequency band and one CV input for total frequency and total gain. Especially with the latter, you have to be very careful, otherwise you have quickly a tinnitus or again R2D2. At deux étagères, these CV inputs and also the single outputs are missing. It is stereo, and the left channel is also usable as a mono. At the right output, only one signal can be tapped, even if the right input is assigned. If you are looking for a fixed filter bank or an equalizer, you should definitely take a look at these modules, because they offer all that and more. Southpow's Rakes is also called a stereo resonator and was influenced by Ableton's resonator effect. I do not know this, so I look at the module completely unbiased. We are dealing here with 1 or rather 6 comp filters, all of which have the same structure. Each has its own volt per octave input, so we can edit 6 different signals at the same time and use sliders to determine whether they are quantized in semitone steps or not quantized at all. In addition, the module has 2 further inputs which are mixed in the output signal with the signals from the comp filters. If no signals are present at the individual inputs, only the mono or the stereo signals are processed by the comp filters. Here, of course, 2 completely different signals can be present. The first knob of the filter is the general frequency. With fine, it can be slightly detuned to generate floating effects or strum effects. And gain sets the ratio of a filter in the overall signal. Decay controls the decay, which results in, e.g., emulate the behavior of strings or other resonant bodies, and that also by CV. With Rakes, wonderful string sounds can be created, as with the classical K+strong synthesis, and partly it sounds like Hairpick by Frozen Wasteland, which is also a comp filter. But in principle, a lot more is possible, as the randomize function clearly shows. And if all inputs are occupied, there are so blatant things possible that VCV-Rack crashes me, because unfortunately the module is also a CPU eater, but it's awesome. The next 2 filters from Squinky Labs are again something special. Foreman's says already what he is, a bandpass filter with high slopes. Remember, LP and HP in series filters both bass and treble, leaving a narrow center band. We also had Foreman's at Frozen Wasteland's Vox Inhumana, so here's also vocals. We can already see this in the upper part of the module, together with a light bar that shows which vowel is currently playing, with the transition between the vowels flowing. With the directly below blue button, you can switch between the vowels or via CV. All blue controls have an associated CV input jack and an attenuator. If this is on the far right, you have full modulation. It is in the middle no modulation, and on the left also full modulation, but with inverted signal. FC stands for frequency control, and here the frequency of the filter is adjusted. Here again, Q is the resonance that does not go to self-oscillation, and bright boosts the high formance level when turned to the right, and lowers it when turned to the left. Finally, the pitch is adjusted with a big black knob. The classical pitches, bass, tenor, countertenor, alto and soprano are possible here, and caudal makes him sing already in the initialized state. Growler is also called vocal animator. Here you can not select vowels. Instead, it consists of 4 bandpass filters, each with its own formant typical frequency. These run in parallel, and the output signals are added together. 4 LFOs with different triangular waves modulate these filters. This creates an effect that sounds like vowels again. The speed of the LFOs can be influenced via the LFO control or by an external signal, whereby the intensity can again be adjusted by means of attenuators, which behave as with formants. The toggle switch in the LFO section affects the synchronization of each LFO. At the bottom, the synchronization is greatest, slightly different in the middle, completely different at the top. The lights indicate the speed of the first 3 LFOs, and the adjacent output jacks allow this LFO signal to be used in other modules. The controller FC sets again the frequency of the filter, Q the resonance, and depth the influence of the LFO on the filter. All 3 are controllable by CV and also have associated attenuators that behave as usual. Of course, the 3 LFO outputs can also be connected to the CV input jacks, which modulates the module itself. With the toggle between in and out, you can boost the bass a bit. For this, the controller must point upwards. The 2 Squinky Labs modules are similar but different. In any case, both are perfect for vocal sound. Formans is a specialist who feels very comfortable in his niche. Growler is also at home in this niche, but he also dares to go outside. Both sound great and neat as usual with Squinky Labs, very little CPU. Parametra is one of the paid modules that VCV offers itself, and with which both the development of VCV-Rack and their free modules are funded. So if you want to continue with VCV-Rack, you should take a look at these excellent modules and buy them. Although Parametra calls itself a parametric equalizer, it is much more than that. But the title on the manual also says Parametric Filter Designer, and that hits the nail on the head. Although it offers 17 different filters, from low pass 48 dB per octave to notch filters, you can use up to 8 different filter types at once and individually set and control their cutoff frequency range and gain via CV. And you can also turn on and off each of the 8 filter types by trigger. I'm really excited about the handling via the display. On the one hand, the frequency spectrum of the signal, or the signals, because the module has 2 inputs and 2 outputs, can be displayed. The options for the display are input signal, output signal, or off. With bypass, the module can be deactivated and put back into operation with enable. In the initialized state, the display shows a straight line on which the numbers 1 to 8 are distributed at regular intervals. We can still see that the line has just 0 dB and the range of the amplitude exceeds plus minus 12 dB. The exact value is not to be learned from the manual, as well as the frequency range. Here we only see that it well below 100 Hz starts and goes beyond 10 kHz. But this is not necessarily important for the handling. Much more important are in the lower half of the display again the 8 numbers that are of course related to those on the line, and each symbolize a filter. Among the numbers we also see the selected filter types. If you would like to select another one, you just have to click with the left mouse button on the filter symbol and then click on the filter you want, and it is already selected and shows with a small graphic what he does to the signal. To activate a filter, just click on the corresponding number above the filter symbol. This lights up as well as the corresponding point on the line. The one on the line can be moved even in the deactivated state. Namely, the cutoff frequency is set horizontally and the amplitude is set vertically. Simple and ingenious. You can hear what a filter does and then see it right away. And since this can also be controlled by CV, of course all possible filter runs are possible. But of course, here also an envelope signal can be introduced. In the graph you can can see not only the setting of the filter, but also its modulation. Speaking of modulation, in the inputs VCA, L and R, a VCA signal can be introduced to regulate the output volume by envelope or similar. And we have here 8 different filters available, all of which can work simultaneously, even in the same frequency range, and which can all be modulated externally. This allows extremely complex filter effects to be realized. You can also use it as a simple parametric equalizer, but if you work hard with it, it offers an almost inexhaustible reservoir of possibilities. Although it costs $30, it is definitely a good investment. The term filter is fixed in VCV-Rack with a name, volt. And not only because there are no fewer than 11 modules listed under filters, but above all because of the sound. Here I introduce the commercial modules included in the Volt Compacts and Volt Premium packages. However, 7 of the modules are also available in the Volt Free package, with Lateralus and Tangents in the premium version having additional options which I will discuss later. The first is Freak from the Volt Compact series, which contains all of Volt's filters but not all the settings, inputs and outputs. I will therefore compare Freak with the original module every time. Adjustable parameters in Freak are resonance, drive and cutoff, and all can be controlled by CV. And there is also an attenuator. Cutoff can even be modulated by 3 different sources at the same time. The module is designed in stereo, where with only one input signal, at both outputs the same signal can be tapped. But not only that, by means of the switch mod route, the 2 inputs A and B of the cutoff frequency can be assigned differently to the outputs, which is also evident in the display. The default setting is combined, where the signals from A and B are added and passed to both outputs. The setting individual sends the signal from A to the left and from B to the right output. With inverse, the left output receives the signal from A minus the signal from B and the right output from B minus A. This alone makes very interesting variations of the sound possible. All knobs clearly show how they work. The parameters from 0 to full and the attenuators to the left negative and to the right positive modulation. Between the inputs and outputs is still a small switch for low power, which also makes sense because Freak already needs quite a bit of CPU. However, the sound character also changes slightly, so you can see the switch as an added value in terms of sound variety. In the display, we see not only the routing of the modulations A and B, but also the currently set filter model and its mode. With the switches underneath, you select these. The first row is for the model and the second for the mode. Use the up arrow to select the next setting and the down arrow to select the previous one. In this way, all options of the filters can be set. Let's get to the filter models. By default, the filter vortex is selected in LP mode. This is also called a Russian filter, since it is based on the famous Russian Polyvox. The filter is a low pass and band pass that can self-oscillate. We see in the analyzer that Freak and Vortex are identical. If I turn Freak into the low power mode, you can clearly see that its slope is increasing. This is difficult to estimate. In the frequency response, it looks like the slope will change from the beginning 6 dB per octave to 24 dB per octave. The original had a slope of 12 dB per octave. Vortex also has a low power mode, so that the signals are the same again. Sonically, the low power mode is slightly higher in altitude. The parameters of Vortex are exactly the same as those of Freak, but with Vortex, both filters can be used at the same time, which definitely influences the special sound of the Polyvox. Describing the sound is always difficult. It ranges from warm bass to dazzling heights, and resonance and drive unleash the predator in it. Personally, I usually prefer Vortex and send the signals from LP and BP to an attenuator to mix their ratio. It would be nice if this would be possible in the module, but it also works like this. Vortex sounds great even in the Freak, but the single module topped that still tremendous. The next module in Freak is Unstabile. But since this is a version of Stabile, let's take a look at it first. Stabile is a state variable filter, as it e.g. was used by Oberheim in OBX and SAME. Especially, the latter plays a big role in the filter design of Stabile, because apart from the filter types, which are common for a state variable filter, two-pole LP, BP and HP, it also offers a SAME output, at which a mixture of LP and HP is output, which is set with the parameter of the same name. This is designed as an attenuator, and turned to the left fades out the highs and turned right the low frequencies. This parameter is limited to the same output. Cutoff and resonance work as usual. Stabile sounds in Freak by the additional drive parameter more aggressive. But also here only one filter type can be set, and the option SAME is not available. As a result, I would even speak of different modules or variants. However, the single module is certainly more versatile again, especially if all four outputs are mixed via an attenuator. Stabile sounds warm and is quite restrained. Unstabile has integrated the drive parameter itself and also introduces non-linearities and can also oscillate itself. Otherwise, the same applies as for Stabile. Unstabile gives the soft sound of Stabile a proper portion of dirt, and that suits it well. Here I tend once again to single module. Of course, never forget the initially mentioned specifics of Freak. Stabile and Unstabile are both unchanged in the volt-free package. Lateralus is a diode ladder filter. This principle is known e.g. from the EMS V3 or Roland TB303. The controllable parameters are again the same as with Freak. In the premium version there are two modes that can be selected via the slider. DF is a more gentle version of the sound, TH more aggressive. In the freely available version there is no choice. The special thing about Lateralus is the selectable slope. 6, 12, 18 and 24 dB per octave are possible here. 18 dB was incidentally used in the Roland TB303. In fact, the individual module also makes it possible to use all slopes at the same time. Different effects or modulations can be obtained. Freak also offers both modes and all slopes. But again, the output is limited to one filter type. The big question is here, do I want to use different slopes at the same time? If not, in this case, the benefits of Freak outweigh. Tangents is also available in a free version as well as part of the premium package, and here too the premium version offers additional modes. Tangents is a two-pole Steiner-Parker filter, so it uses the filter design of the Synthecon, which has been revived by the Arturia Mini Brute. Parameters of the single modules also correspond to those of Freak. The modes are YU, which corresponds to the original Synthecon filter, MS is a gentler version, and XX is referred to in the description of Tangents only as pure madness, so an extreme variant. Unlike the other filters, there are no multiple outputs, but multiple inputs. This makes it possible to introduce different signals with different filters to edit and output this mixed in the output. Here I recommend to switch an attenuator before the inputs to change the ratio of the input signals. But Freak does not have that option again, although it offers all modes and also the filter types, but also not the possibility of the single module. That's why I prefer this again. Ferox is included as a single module only in the Volt Premium range. He calls himself CMOS filter, and since I have found nothing on the internet except that it probably goes to semiconductor elements, I quote here once the Volt website. Ferox is based on the ingenious CMOS filter design. The CMOS filter uses a digital inverter chip to replace operational amplifiers. The result filter is full of character, distorted and aggressive. Ferox can transform the simplest waveforms into completely new sound. In some cases it will make you doubt that it is a filter at all." End quote. Apart from the usual 3 parameters, Ferox still has the parameter byte, which is not included in Freak and which provides an additional byte. Ferox provides the filter types LP, BP, HP and Notch, and all can be used simultaneously in the single module. Freak does not offer that possibility again, and I could get over it, but without a byte parameter, Ferox is just a shadow of itself. The strength of Ferox is aggressive and distorted and requires the right byte. So again, clearly the trend to the single module. The next module in Freak is New Rage, but since this is more than a filter, I move it a bit and first turn to Rescomp. The name already tells it is a comp filter with resonance, and he has completely different parameters than Freak. Therefore, I am also of the opinion that it is about different modules or variants. For Rescomp, the frequency is determined by a signal at the volt per octave input. This can be fixed voltage or changing one. With tune, the frequency can be detuned. Freak uses the cutoff control as usual, and we remember that this can be influenced by 3 different modulation sources at the same time. The parameter comp is an attenuator and determines the comp filter size depending on the input signal and the signal at the volt per octave input. Turned to the left, the comp is smaller, larger to the right. In Freak, you can choose between comp plus and comp minus, and this affects the function of the cutoff knob. That is, the comp size is either larger when the filter is further turned on or when it is closed. The feedback parameter in Rescomp is synonymous with resonance and works accordingly. In Freak, the sound can be additionally distorted with a drive control, which can also be used to create other sounds. Both variants are interesting and have their own strengths. But for me, the version in Freak is just ahead by the drive and the modulations options. The most recent filter in Freak is New Rage, which is just the filter section of the module, a mix of a Buchla filter and a Korg MS-20 filter, hence called a Borg filter. It is influenced by the usual 3 parameters and offers only this one mode. However, the 2 CV inputs A and B also make a low-pass gate effect possible by introducing gate signals here. The New Rage filter in Freak is a good-sounding analog filter that lives up to its big role models. New Rage is part of the paid Volt Premium package and much more than just a filter. He calls himself Dual Low-Pass Gate/Filter. In principle, a low-pass gate is a mixture of low-pass filter and VCA. Accordingly, the parameters are like other filters and also fulfill the same tasks, but there are other options. Cutoff is therefore not only responsible for the filter cutoff, but also for the opening of the gate, for which he is assigned 2 CV inputs, including attenuator. Fully turned on, the gate is also open at maximum. However, using only one gate signal will trigger both gates. If you use 2 gate signals, you can switch the 2 signals independently of each other by means of the gate switch, which is standard on link. With the switch Vectrol, you activate a mode which simulates a Vectrol circuit, or better said, it's characteristic to react only delayed at fast gate signals. This also causes a delay or a reverberation in the signal. Finally, with the VCA switch, you can choose whether the modulation acts on the amplitude or on the filter. Because of all these possibilities and the great sound, which significantly enhances rhythmic parts, New Rage as a single module is much more versatile than the implementation in Freak. New Rage is not the only low-pass gate of Volt, there is also the free module Julste. This is modulated according to the original Buchla low-pass gate. Here, too, a gate signal defines at what time and at what frequency a signal may pass. Range determines the opening of the gate. On the left, the opening is minimal, right is maximum. With the offset parameter, you set a minimum value for the gate turn to the left and turn to the right a maximum value. Resonance is the usual parameter. Sharpness defines the influence of Vectrol on the signal. At the far left, the gate corresponds to the inserted gate signal. At the far right, it corresponds more to an envelope curve, and consecutive signals are separated more sharply. All parameters can of course be controlled by CV and also have an associated attenuator. With a switch, you can select between VCA and low pass. In VCA mode, only the amplitude of the input signal is modulated, and here only the parameter sharpness works. Julste works much more reserved than New Rage, but is still very good for rhythmic structures. I think they complement each other wonderfully because everyone can do something the other cannot. The episode concludes with Toe, another module of the Volt 3 series. Tone control already says that we are dealing here not with a filter but an equalizer. It is designed in stereo. If only one signal is introduced, this can be tapped at both outputs. The frequency is set with the tone control. Turn to the left, high frequencies fade out, to the right, low frequencies. This can also be controlled by CV, and there is also an associated attenuator. The model switch determines the behavior of the tone controller using an equalizer model. Bass is a standard control with a very strong influence on the signal. The S corresponds to a 10-band equalizer, which allows a finer adjustment, and puff a dispersion model for very gentle and subtle frequency changes. The 3 modes and the ability to control CV make Toe much more versatile than a simple equalizer. All of the Volt modules shown here leave an excellent impression on me, although the design also appeals to me very much. Of course, more important is the sound, and it's just great, and actually each module sounds different. So it makes perfect sense to have it all available. Again and again the question arises as to which of the paid packages from Volt you should get. The answer is simple: both. Freak is absolutely versatile, but he is just more the all-rounder and the individual modules rather the specialists. Nevertheless, Freak can do things that the specialists cannot and vice versa. The premium package is now complete with New Rage and thus contains 8 exclusive modules. Lateralos and tangents in slimmed down form are also in the free package, and Noxious are included as a monophonic and polyphonic VCO. Volt Compacts currently only consists of Freak and Incubus, but there will be more modules here. But in order to not make one-sided advertising for Volt now, here's again the hint. VCV-Rack and many free modules are funded by paid modules, and these are all extremely cheap and definitely worth their money. And hereby we are at the end of episode 12, so I introduced almost all currently available filters. As soon as enough new modules have been added or the bugs have been removed in the case of current modules that I have not yet presented, there will also be an update here. It continues next week with VCAs. As always, you will find links to the most important web pages and also to the developers of the modules introduced this time under the video. And not to forget, many thanks to Andrew Belt and all the module developers without whom all this would not be possible. That's it from me. Take care. Servus.